Da Vinci is one of a long line of artists who have told us, beginning with the ancient Egyptians and running through the early Christians and Tibetans, that art is a medium, it's a conduit.
For centuries, humanity has stood before Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper and assumed it held one story: the final meal of Jesus Christ before his betrayal. Historians catalogued it. Priests preached from it. Art lovers wept over it. But no one ever imagined that buried beneath its crumbling plaster and fading pigment, a genius from the 1400s had left behind a message meant only for the future. A message so bold, so subversive, and so eerily accurate that when artificial intelligence finally decoded it in 2025, grown scholars sat frozen in silence, some trembling. So what exactly did Leonardo hide inside the world's most analyzed painting? And why did uncovering it feel less like a discovery and more like a warning? To understand what was found, you first have to understand who Leonardo da Vinci truly was. Most people know him as a painter. Fewer appreciate that he was a man living in a state of constant intellectual danger. In 15th century Italy, the Catholic Church held absolute authority over art, knowledge, and public thought. To question the Church was to risk everything: your reputation, your freedom, your life. Yet Leonardo questioned everything. His private notebooks, thousands of pages of mirror-written observations, anatomical sketches, and engineering blueprints, reveal a mind that refused to stop at the surface of things. He dissected human corpses in secret to understand the body. He sketched flying machines when flight was considered the territory of angels. He wrote backwards so that casual readers could not decipher his thoughts. This was not eccentricity. It was survival. Leonardo was a man who had too many dangerous ideas to write them plainly, so he encoded them. He hid them in math, in geometry, in art. And the greatest canvas he ever used for concealment was the mural that now watches over a restored dining hall in Milan. The Last Supper, painted between 1495 and 1498 on the wall of Santa Maria delle Grazie. He didn't use the standard fresco method. He invented his own, mixing tempera and oil directly onto dry plaster, a technique that allowed him greater control and more brilliant color. It also meant the painting began deteriorating within decades of completion. Historians long mourned that decay, but decay, as it turns out, may have been exactly what Leonardo counted on, because what the layers of damaged paint hid from naked eyes, they preserved perfectly for machines that wouldn't exist for another 5 centuries. In early 2025, a collaborative research team made up of scientists from institutions in Italy and Japan launched what they called the Da Vinci Decoded Initiative. Their goal was ambitious: use cutting-edge artificial intelligence to analyze The Last Supper at a level of detail no human team could match. The centerpiece of their method was hyperspectral imaging, a scanning technique that captures light across hundreds of wavelengths, far beyond the visible spectrum. Where the human eye sees a wall of flaking paint, hyperspectral equipment sees layers. It sees what lies beneath the brushwork, beneath the grime of centuries, beneath repairs made by hands that came long after Leonardo's. Every millimeter of the mural was digitized. Every shadow, hairline crack, variation in pigment density, and ghost of a brushstroke was converted into a data point. The resulting data set was staggering in size. More information contained in a single square foot of that wall than most people encounter in a lifetime of reading. That data was then fed into an AI system trained specifically on Leonardo's documented output: his notebooks, his letters, his anatomical sketches, and, crucially, his mirror script, the backward handwriting he used to keep his private thoughts private. The AI wasn't searching for anything in particular. It was looking for patterns. And within weeks, it found them. The initial alerts from the system were easy to dismiss. Small clusters of marks flagged in areas of the painting that most restoration experts had written off as superficial damage. A smear along the back wall, faint disturbances beneath the tablecloth, peculiar repetitions in the shadowed folds of a disciple's robe. The lead historian on the project, Dr. Elena Rossi, a Da Vinci specialist with over 2 decades of experience, initially assumed the AI was chasing noise. Cracks in old plaster can look like nearly anything if you stare long enough, but the AI didn't stare, it calculated, and it kept returning to the same coordinates, the same shapes, the same clusters. When the team ran the flagged areas through additional processing, ultraviolet light, infrared reflectography, and X-ray fluorescence scanning, the noise resolved into something unmistakable. Letters. Faint, layered beneath the original paint, but structurally consistent with Leonardo's known handwriting. Some were reversed in his characteristic mirror style. Some were angled or compressed, but their architecture matched. The AI cross-referenced them against thousands of confirmed Leonardo manuscripts, and the probability of coincidence collapsed to near zero. Dr. Rossi leaned forward at her monitor, and in a moment that the team would later describe as one of collective breathlessness, said quietly, "He didn't just paint a scene, he wrote inside it." The words she was reading were not Bible verses. They were not liturgical. They were in the old Florentine dialect of Italian that Leonardo used in his private journals. Intimate, precise, and unmistakably his. What the AI uncovered over the following weeks amounted to nearly 40 distinct phrases embedded throughout the composition. They were not scattered at random. When the team mapped their positions, a startling structure emerged. The phrases followed a spiral pattern originating at Jesus' right hand and radiating outward to each of the 12 disciples in sequence, as if the painting was designed as a clock or a key to be read in a specific order. The language was dense with meaning. Near the figure of Judas, the disciple tradition has forever associated with betrayal. The hidden text translated to, "The one who deceives does so first within himself." Beneath the image of Peter, whose story centers on impulsive loyalty, the inscription read, "Strength without wisdom is merely a weapon waiting for the wrong hand." Thomas, famous for demanding proof before belief, was flanked by the words, "To doubt is not weakness. It is the first honest act of the mind." But the phrases grew weightier as the AI worked toward the center of the composition. Along the base of the wall behind Jesus, one line emerged that made the team fall silent. "All that is worshipped was first shaped by a human hand." That single sentence, hidden for over 500 years beneath the most celebrated religious painting in Western history, carried implications that nobody in that lab was fully prepared for. It did not deny the divine, but it raised a question that Leonardo, given his documented beliefs about observation, reason, and skepticism, had clearly been asking in private for decades. And the most significant inscription of all was found last. Beneath the central figure of Jesus himself, woven into the very fabric of the robe, a near-invisible line had survived 5 centuries of deterioration. Hyperspectral imaging finally brought it forward. Translated, it read, "Truth belongs not to those who declare it, but to those who are willing to seek it without fear." When the full set of phrases was assembled and read as a unified text, a coherent and deeply subversive philosophy emerged. Leonardo had not painted a devotional work. He had disguised a manifesto inside one. The overarching message, reconstructed by the AI from the positions, language, and thematic resonance of all 40 phrases, resolved into a single idea. Faith without reason is the sleep of truth, and those who wake will see what has long been forbidden. This was a man who believed that the Church, the institution that commissioned his work, fed him, protected him, and could destroy him, was actively suppressing knowledge. Not out of malice necessarily, but out of the same fear that had always governed those in power, the fear of a population that thinks for itself. Leonardo had witnessed the consequences of intellectual curiosity. He had friends tried for heresy. He had hidden his own anatomical studies under assumed names. He understood perfectly what happened to people who spoke plainly about what they observed. So he did what only he could do. He took the one canvas that the church would never dare destroy, its own most sacred imagery, and he hid his dissent inside it. In the very painting meant to celebrate blind faith, he encoded a challenge to it. The audacity is breathtaking. The patience it required to work those inscriptions into a composition that would be examined by bishops and cardinals and papal emissaries is the kind that belongs only to someone who is playing a very long game. A game, it turns out, that lasted 527 years. When the Da Vinci Decoded team finally released their findings to the public, the reaction was immediate and global. Within hours, the research paper had been downloaded hundreds of thousands of times. News networks interrupted programming. The story was everywhere. The Vatican released a terse statement indicating that church scholars would review the findings independently, adding that interpretations of sacred art must be approached with appropriate caution. Behind that diplomatic language, sources with access to Vatican communications described an institution in genuine turmoil. The messages themselves did not constitute blasphemy in any traditional sense, but their implications, that Leonardo had deliberately encoded skepticism about religious authority into the Church's most prominent commission, were destabilizing in a way that was difficult to manage with a press release. In Florence, the research team was inundated. Journalists camped outside the lab. Academic institutions that had initially kept a polite distance from the project were now urgently requesting collaborations. 3 major museums announced plans to create interactive digital exhibitions, allowing visitors to see the hidden inscriptions layered over the original image. Lines formed around the block in Milan, where people who had seen the painting dozens of times returned to look at it again, differently now, with the knowledge that every surface they admired contained a second conversation. Not everyone celebrated the discovery. Religious organizations in several countries called for the scans to be suspended, arguing that the AI was projecting meaning onto natural deterioration. Protests appeared outside the Santa Maria delle Grazie. Petitions circulated demanding that the hyperspectral data be sealed, but none of it stopped the images from spreading. The Internet had already done what 5 centuries of stone walls and locked archives could not. It had released Leonardo's voice into the open air, and once out, it could not be recalled. The Last Supper still hangs in Milan. Its plaster is still crumbling at the edges. Its colors are still fading in the slow, patient way that time erodes everything. But the painting has been permanently transformed by what the machines found inside it. Visitors who stand before it now are standing before 2 things simultaneously: a masterwork of Renaissance devotion and a secret act of intellectual rebellion, layered into the same surface by the same brush. What strikes historians most is not just that Leonardo hid these words, but that he engineered their survival. By using his unconventional paint application, the very technique that critics once blamed for the painting's rapid deterioration, he ensured the inscription settled into the lower layers where time would protect rather than erase them. He may not have known about artificial intelligence, but he understood, in the way that only the most extraordinary minds can, that the future would eventually build the tools to find what the present was not ready to see. Da Vinci once wrote that the greatest deception men suffer is from their own opinions. He spent his life trying to move past opinion and toward evidence, toward observation, toward proof, toward the kind of truth that doesn't require permission. In the Last Supper, he left a monument to that lifelong belief, not in the figures everyone always looked at, but in the shadows behind them, in the silence beneath the paint. Waiting. If you found this story as extraordinary as it deserves to be, subscribe now and click the next video to go deeper into the hidden worlds that history never wanted you to find.